Hello and welcome back to my program. Today is September the 3rd, 2009, and my name is James Stratton. I help people through some of the toughest times in their life through a process called mediation. Mediation is about restoring relationships and reputations in a non-threatening, non-judgmental, and confidential manner that is far less expensive than going the traditional route of going to court. And today we're going to actually get down to the nuts and bolts of this. My job is to help take the super complex and make it super simple. It's to unloosen the cogs that cause two people to not be able to sit down and do simple negotiations that they would have done on their own. Today we're finally finishing up a four-part series in which we talked about a construction case and a real estate case gone bad, in which a party went out to go purchase a custom home that's worth $1.2 million, and a builder built it for them, and they ran into some problems leaking over the leaking house. And as we learned earlier, the surprise, it was the home builder who actually brought the lawsuit against the home buyer. And we learned on Monday how the relationship was formed and how it came apart. And then on Tuesday, we talked about the plaintiff's case and what they had to say. And then the defendant's case on Wednesday and what they would need to do to defend themselves against it. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to find out how this finally ended up and how could a mediation brought about by a quicker and better resolution than what they got out of the situation of filing a lawsuit. Now, remember we talked about at one time about what pre-litigation mediation is versus post-litigation mediation. So I'll remind you of that now. Pre-litigation mediation occurs prior to a lawsuit being filed. Post is after a litigation has been filed and the party has been made aware of their lawsuit by being served. All right, so the pleadings are in. So how long did it take for this case to finally get resolved, and how did it get resolved? Well, it took 27 months for this case to get resolved. That's a long time, folks. And it started in November of 2004 and ended in the latter part of February 2007. So that's an awful long time. Now, unfortunately, parties think that these cases resolve rather quickly. And on the flip side of that, oftentimes attorneys want their clients to feel like they're working for them. So they'll go out and do lots of filings, and there was in this case. And every single month, from the other 27 months, there's filings on both sides. And let's just say for a moment that, we don't know what it's going to cost. But let's say, for instance, each party had to pay maybe $27,000 a piece. Business litigation is fairly expensive, so that's a lot of money to get to a resolution. So how could mediation have done a better job? Well, first of all, mediation is a lot less expensive. And mediation, in many ways, has a lot of techniques that help them resolve conflicts. Much like a martial art is used in a particular fight or scenario, there's our techniques that can be applied. If a technique is applied properly, it has a lot of good results. If it's applied in the wrong time, it has negative results and usually ends up worse off than where you began. So here we go. Let's take a look at one of the techniques that can be applied by a mediator. One is just the hard facts. And as a mediator, remember, I can't substitute my judgment, but I can help you see the light. And one of those questions was, if you'll remember, the plaintiff wanted money because they spent $50,000 to restore this problem that they had, in which the home buyer had hired a third party to put in a reverse osmosis filtration system. Never mind the fact that they were angry because they lost the sale with that. The big problem is why did they spend $50,000 to begin with? I've got a good friend of mine that I used to do work with, or actually I worked for, and his name is Alan Robinson. And I'm going to tell you something. He'd pin your ears back. And by the way, I found him on LinkedIn. If you're not on LinkedIn, you need to go on over there and take a look at it. It's a wonderful program. I'm looking at a picture of him right now. He kind of reminds me of a Muppet character, and Beaker comes to mind. But no, he doesn't. But he's a really good guy. And but one of the things he always harped on was ask the right questions before you find yourself tangled up in trouble. And one of the first questions I think the builder probably could have asked the home buyer when the leak was discovered was, has any alterations occurred to the home since you've moved in? In other words, have you had any alterations done? And if the home buyer comes back and says, yeah, we had this reverse osmosis filtration system put in, but boy, it's a wonderful system, well, you might want to start looking there first for probably the problem if it passed all of its inspections as we learned before. That didn't cost $50,000. That's a question. That's a real simple question. The next thing is when, let's say, for instance, the home buyer says, oh, no, yeah, we didn't do anything. And oftentimes, people do lie. Okay? Well, when you went around the house to look, and you see these extra pipes hanging off the house that don't belong on the blueprint, didn't that give you a clue that something was going on here? So why did you spend $50,000 to come up with this solution? So that's one of the velvet hammer things you would use with the plaintiff to get them to kind of see some reality. Well, let's go over and look at the defendant's side of this house. Well, it turns out that the third party that put in the reverse osmosis filtration system went out of business the very month they put the system in. And they couldn't find recourse against these people who brought damages against us. So guess who they picked on? The home builder. Now, as a mediator, I would bring that to their attention. How can you, in good conscience, try to bring something against somebody that you know they weren't responsible for, or should have had a reasonable belief? And so these are some of the things we work on and we harp on between the two parties. Now, there's other techniques to get them to come to an agreement, but mediation is very successful, usually about 96% success rate. So kind of keep that in mind as we go. So how do you choose? How would you know to use a mediator? Well, first of all, a good business owner should have at least a mediator on their Rolodex, one that they like, that they get along with. And so how do you choose one? Well, does a mediator have to be a lawyer? No, they don't have to be a lawyer. They can be anyone that specializes in any kind of field. In other words, I would find a person who was trained in construction, understood the construction industry, and had been trained in mediation and was credentialed or had certification in mediation. And I'd have that person on my Rolodex. So when a situation does happen like this, and they do, it's not uncommon when we spend a lot of money with somebody, we do run into problems. That's when you pick up the phone and you call the other party up and you say, hey, look, I really enjoy the relationship we have, but we're not seeing eye to eye here. I've got a mediator here that I work with that is familiar with these kinds of situations, and I really want to keep our relationship alive, and I don't want to ruin it. So let me have this person give you a call, or you can call them and see if you like them, and you sit down and discuss it. So how much does mediation cost? Well, it ranges in price, but a specialist is going to charge a fair amount per hour. But you could have probably gotten this whole thing done for less than $1,000. It just depends on what you run into. And at the worst case, it didn't settle, and you still have the route to be able to sue by. Now, when you get into the courthouse, most of the time, the judges order it into mediation anyway. So it's going to end up there. So why find out thousands of dollars later that you got to go to mediation anyway when you could have done it up front? Okay, now, with that being said, remember I talked about martial arts techniques being applied at the wrong time, having detrimental effects. Well, sometimes that's the way it is in court cases where they're ordered to mediation. Oftentimes we see these going to mediation just literally days before they go to trial. And a person may have reasons for not wanting to settle. Maybe they think they can get a better shot at trial. So you really tie up the hands of the mediator before they get a chance to get in there. When a court case gets going, people tend to get locked up in positions, and it's hard to pry them out. They're not very pliable. Whereas when the case has not been filed, it's still left in a private venue, and people are more pliable. They're more open to willingness to be reasonable. Now, back to what I said, I don't know how this would have turned out, but honestly, to spend $50,000 in resolving an issue that wasn't even theirs, and then for the defendant to want to go to the builder rather than the third party, well, we'll see where that leads to. Now, stay tuned. Next week we'll have a different case to look at, and we'll do the same thing, and we'll break it up just like we did this week. If you've run into a very similar situation to this, and you would like to leave some comments for me, please do so at www.whoisjamesstratton.com/blog1. You can also leave a personal email for me at james.stratton@interventionmediation.com, and you can use that for more of a private thing if you just want to kind of talk to me about that. I do appreciate the comments that I've gotten so far, and I think this venue kind of works better than what we tried to do last week. But have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Remember, tomorrow is Free Friday, so we can talk about comments and things, questions other people have asked. So stay tuned for tomorrow. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.